Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host and creator of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the creator, editor, translator, and writer of the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So, to the origins of today's article, uh, I guess you could say, came from uh, the numbers. It came from looking at my stats on my blog. This has happened previously. This is something intriguing about blogging is that when you have material about a particular topic and people start visiting the blog in search of information about that particular topic, it can actually inform you about something that's people are talking about currently. This has happened on the blog numerous times in the past where I write an article about a particular topic or a particular personality, and all of a sudden, out of the sky blue, an article from like 2 or 3 years, 6 years previously, all of a sudden becomes the most viewed post of the day. This happened a few years ago. I think it was 2019 or 2020. It must have been about 2020 when a popular comedian, I think his name was now I can't even remember his name. I know it was Paulo something. And he was a well-loved comic actor. He was known for, his skits on in comedy shows and in Brazilian movies. He had contracted COVID, during the whole pandemic season. And it was looking like he was going to survive. And then one day he just passed away. I think Paulo Gustavo, I think that was his name. And I had written a few pieces about him previously, you know, uh, some of the controversial nature of some of his skits. It was one particular skit that people called him out for because he chose to wear blackface in this particular skit. Um, and so I knew that he had been in the hospital for a minute, but everybody fully expected that he would overcome, when he was hospitalized, and then the news broke that he died. The point is, when he died, I didn't know it at that time. I knew he had been hospitalized, probably, I don't know, it might have been a couple of months. And so I didn't know he passed away until one day I was looking at the stats on my blog, and all of a sudden I started seeing the few articles that mentioned his name on my blog were the highest, most viewed post of the day. And it was like, okay, why are people looking at this article about Paulo Gustavo out of the blue from a few years ago? And then it struck me. I'm like, oh wow, don't tell me he died. And that's how I found out that Paulo had died. I started doing an internet search, and it confirmed that he had passed away. And then it happened another time with there are several Brazilian artists, Black Brazilian singers, who were some of the people who brought soul music to Brazil. It was soul music. This is something that captivated me when I first started getting into Brazilian music. And the singer named Cassiano had passed away. I'm not sure if he passed away from COVID also. I think he was about 77 or 78, but he's known for having been one of the first singers to really popularize soul music in Brazil. And that's the same way I found out that he had died, when out of the blue, a post I had put out about him. I don't know if it was months or a year previously. And when he died, that's how I found out, because I wondered why my blog post had blown up that particular day about Cassiano. And true enough, he died. There's several other examples of this where I actually become informed of some breaking news because of the numbers, of an article on my blog. So actually today, this is another example of how the blog stats can tell you what's going on. It's telling you what people are checking out on the blog. Like, this is a hot story. So, I haven't really followed pop culture in several years now. And I just happened to look at my blog stats one particular day. I think it might have been Monday or Tuesday of this past week. And all of a sudden, several articles that I had posted about the singer Anitta were the top four posts of the day. And I'm like, okay, what's going on with Anitta? She's always in the news, but I just wondered why all of a sudden, Anita's going to always be in the news, but I would just wondered why that particular day were the top four most viewed articles on the blog were about Anitta. And so when I went to start searching for some info, okay, that's the title of today's article. Anitta wins a Video Music Award, becoming the first Brazilian to win the award. Now, I've talked a bit about Anitta in several posts here, or rather, actually on the Black Brazil Today blog, and because Anitta's appearance and the way her racial politics or lack of them play out, it was a perfect fit for the things that I already talk about on this blog. In future videos, I have to explore that a little bit more because there's a lot to say about Anitta, and people have dissected her career, her appearance, her politics, her racial politics, all of these things come into play. I have some of this stuff, in past articles I'll get to one of these days. But for now, let me look into this victory. This was an enormous career achievement for Anitta. She took home a Video Music Award. I think it was on Sunday in New Jersey. So a big win, first Brazilian to ever perform on the VMAs, first Brazilian to ever take home an award at the VMAs. That's really big news. And when you follow Brazil, you notice that Brazilians really make a big deal of it when one of their own make it big outside of the country, whether they're blowing up in Europe or they're blowing up in, the United States, wherever they might be, because Brazil is not one of the big power players on the stage, so they look for shine however they can get it. So regardless, there's a whole the Brazil is divided on the type of music that people like Anitta makes. There's a whole movement called funk in Brazil, and you have a conservative side of the country that despises this music. They see it as trash, it's degrading. Whereas the other side argues this is our culture. This came up it's a Afro-Brazilian influenced style, and it should be respected. We have the right to exist. I've got a whole lot of different opinions on that whole thing, which I'm not going to get into today because it's it. I'll be talking for a couple of hours, but let's focus on this victory for Anitta, last week or earlier this week, as it would be. So this is Anitta, taking the stage. She gave a short speech about how she became the first Brazilian. This is a big night for her, first Brazilian to win a VMA. So I've said this before. I can't pretend to be a fan of her music, but I can admit that I admire and I am impressed by her ascension in the world of global pop music. If you don't know who I'm talking about, it is the Brazilian pop funk sensation Anitta. I'll say it 100 times. Music today, at least the pop stuff, simply doesn't have the same soul and feel of the music of decades gone by. Now, some people could argue and say, okay, well, music has to keep changing. And I get that. There were periods of the music in the past, music that I liked growing up, and it was an advance on the music in the previous generation that my parents listened to. But I'm just of the opinion that the stuff that we're hearing nowadays, 2021, 2022, the music seems to get lesser and less human. There was a story that broke, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about this artificial intelligence rapper. They had created this, image of this rapper, a robotic rapper, and it was just like a walking stereotype of how certain segments of American society see the Black rapper. There was so much protest against this robot that they had to pull it. So this is feeding into what I'm talking about, how artificial music is becoming these days. I mean, maybe some people agree. I guess it really depends on what generation you come from. But how much of today's music uses the classic lineup of piano, keyboard, rhythm, lead guitar, bass, and drums? I remember a musician friend of mine saying how he noted how artificial the music has sounded since the disappearance of live horns in popular music. If you go back to the 70s, let's say before the disco era, and even during the disco era, you still had, pop rock groups and R&B soul groups that had full horn sections. It brings a real human element music touches on your emotions, and horns have a way. I mean, to think about how strong music is and how you think and how you feel, just imagine watching a film without the soundtrack, without the score, without the backing music. And I'm just feeling a loss of that human touch in today's music. And you see people like Anita, props to her for her success, but I'm not necessarily in support of the type of music that she makes because it just seems like every few years the music gets even more artificial. People could feel free to disagree with that. That's obviously that's not a problem, but that's how I feel about where pop music is going today. To me, to find real music, you have to really dig because it's not going to be something you're going to hear on the radio. So, this idea about the disappearance of horns in popular music is very true. When's the last time you heard a horn section in a pop, R&B, or rock song? It seems that all of today's music seems to be created on computers, which doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but at the same time, it really depends on how much the music is computer generated. Even in the 90s, when rappers could go into a studio and create full CDs with nothing but a vinyl album, a sampler, and a drum machine. At least then they were sampling real music, which brought out an authenticity to the sounds. In reality, Anita's meteoric rise to pop stardom coincides with the rise and dominance of social media, where everyone is going overboard, doing any and everything to get more eyes and ears to see and hear their products. It seems that right along with the popularity of Anita's music came an interest in everything the woman did, from the type of clothing she wore, how many plastic surgeries she's undergone, and which partner, male or female, she may or may not have been sleeping with. I vividly remember when Anita made her debut with the hit song Show Das Poderosas well, it's almost a decade now. It was actually a catchy little ditty accompanied by a tightly choreographed black and white music video featuring the singer and her crew of dancers. Don't get me wrong, by pop music standards, it was cool, but it didn't really strike me as anything that was totally groundbreaking in terms of, what the song sounded like. Maybe it was the idea and demand for female empowerment that had been rising in Brazil for some time, much of it led by Black women's movements. The word poderosas itself translates into the powerful ones. Perhaps Brazilians saw in Anita an image and package that nibbled just a bit off of the queen bee's mystique. I mean, didn't Beyonce have a hit some years ago or a few years before Anita debuted called Run the World? Girls Run the World. But sometimes it seemed to me that Brazil was in search of a woman who could be marketed as the Brazilian Beyonce. And this is something that this used to amaze me. This is a piece right here that I did way back in 2012, and it was just talking about pretty voluptuous media. Brazil's media would often just define them in some type of way as the Beyonce Brasileira, the Brazilian Beyonce. And this is not something I'm making up. I'm saying when I used to read material online, I constantly saw in quotes, Beyonce Brasileira. Now this is in 2012. I haven't covered this in a while, but there's been several women along the way that have been compared to Beyonce. It's like we want someone from Brazil, and it's like that in so many different areas. Whenever someone in Brazil gets big, they try to peg that person to an international figure, someone maybe coming out of the United States that has an international fame. So they want to promote their artists and their personalities in the same way because Brazil does not get the same spotlight as countries such as the United States or Britain or France or these types of places. So to garner attention for some of these people, they will label them as the Brazilian Beyonce, right? Here's just a few of them. You have like God, I forget this young lady's name, but she was a singer. I think was her name Layla or something. This is a famous carnival dancer. She was a dancer and she appeared in she may be still performing in yearly carnivals in Brazil. This is Gabi Amarantos. I'm probably messing her name up, but she appeared on the music scene several years ago. She came from the Northeast, and they were marketing her as the Brazilian Beyonce. I think this is Ilgi Silva. She's an actress. This is Juliana Alves. This is Thais Araújo. Now, they didn't necessarily market Thais Araújo as a Brazilian Beyonce, but she is the closest thing in terms of media popularity and success as they're going to come to, say, somebody of the stature of a Beyonce. I'm throwing Juliana Alves in here because when Beyonce's Single Ladies video came out, everybody around the world was creating their own. They were copying the video and doing their own spin. And Juliana Alves was one of the women that I saw performing that Single Ladies dance, right? There's been several other women since then. And of course, if I'm not mistaken, that's not the one. But Anitta is one of those artists who has been seen as possibly being Brazil's representation of the popularity of somebody like Beyonce, right? Way. In fact, that's another piece that I featured a few years ago. When, like I said, I have a number of pieces on here that's talking about Anitta, and she's in some, a lot of people love Anitta. She has her own fan section, just like Beyonce's the Beehive or whatever. And you got people who will defend Anitta to the end. And so this is one article that I had. It says a French newspaper refers to singer Anitta as Rio's Beyonce because of her rising international success. Now, I want to continue with the current article that we're doing, and I'll have to come back to some of the other links that I covered of other articles talking about Anitta, because they're going to play out for you to get some context about the importance and the controversial nature of Anitta's career. Anitta seemed to have the right package. She could step. She was pretty. She was willing to be bootylicious. She was racially ambiguous, something that Brazil has long prided itself on in almost obsessive pursuit of whiteness. And whatever flaws she thought she might have, she was willing to fix them, as it has been reported that the artist has undergone at least 50 plastic surgeries. In December of 2021, Anitta was quoted as saying, "I accept myself, but I like to change. For me, having plastic surgery is like changing my hair. I think of young people looking at a magazine or Instagram and saying, how I wish I was born that way. She is beautiful, her life is perfect, and feeling bad. For me, there are two options. Either my fans will know the truth, for example, that I am full of plastics, or they will know that I am a liar." Now, this is not something to necessarily point out with just Anitta, because another previous article that I did some years ago, it just shows that it seems like it's just part of the norm. When a Brazilian woman hits the big time, she becomes popular in the media, it's like she automatically is going to undergo some type of plastic surgery procedure. There was a funk singer some years ago, uh, Tachi da Quebrada, I think her name was. And she had, last I saw her, she was up to like 28, 29, 30 plastic surgeries. And she just kept doing it over and over and over. Brazil is one of those countries that's always in the top 2 or top 3 countries in the world that have the most plastic surgeries. So seeing that Anitta, with all of the fame and fortune that she's attained, it shouldn't be surprising how many times she's gone under the knife. I will say that even having undergone so many plastic surgeries, she still looks relatively normal, you could say. I mean, you see definitive differences when you see her before she got famous and what you see now. It's a totally polished product. That's another topic, but I'm saying if you look this up online, just look up, Brazilian women and plastic surgeries, and you'll see that this is just very common for the population as a whole. Yes, there are many things that must be done, many sacrifices to get to pop superstardom. And it seems that Anitta is willing to do just about any and everything to get there and remain there. Perhaps another piece will be necessary to really get into the Anitta mystique and some of the controversies that have come along with her past superstardom. But for now, let's focus on a recent huge career achievement in her pursuit of international stardom. Now, one thing I want to get into about Anitta before I continue with the current piece, there was a period where she had this sort of funk feud going on with a popular Black singer named Ludmilla. It got pretty ugly. Anitta's fans came after her. Ludmilla has carved out her own career. Girl is a multimillionaire herself now. But in the 2019 multi-show award ceremony, when she took the stage, Anitta's fans were in the audience and they just started booing her to the point where she just broke down and started crying on stage. It was like, okay, in 96 and 97 in the States, we saw a feud between two rappers lead to death of each one of them. You know who I'm talking about. So my thing was like, y'all need to chill out before somebody ends up dead. That's why it was like a funk feud, right? Then Anita has always been accused of cultural appropriation because Anita has never come forward and defined herself as a black woman. She'll often say that her father was black. But what you'll notice in a lot of Anita's videos, when she wants to appeal to the streets, you see her video, she'll record her video in the favelas, in the poor section, poor communities. You see her surrounded by black people, but she has never officially defined herself as a black woman. Now, some people might say, okay, well, what's the problem with that? I guess it depends on how you see her. Some people see Anita as just your typical Brazilian mestiza, mixed race. Some people see her as, look, she's a light skinned black woman. Some people see her as having passed over into whiteness. And I understand how Anita has kept away from the racial controversy because she's laughing all the way to the bank. Like, hey, I'm whoever to whoever. That's almost seems like how she's dealing with this whole controversy. So as she is not necessarily defining herself as a black woman, but she wants to use so many facets of black Brazilian culture, people have accused her of cultural appropriation. This was the issue with one of her big hits back in 2017 called Vai Malandra. Singer's new video once again stirs up questions of racial identity and cultural appropriation. All of these articles can be found at blackbraziltoday.com. She made news again earlier that year in 2017 when she says in Brazil, no one is white. Long accused of whitening her look, Singer's new look provokes comments of black cultural appropriation. So what's going on here? A lot of people in this particular article, people were saying that, it seems that as Anita climbs the global scene of pop music popularity, when she's outside of Brazil, she wants to make herself appear whiter. Whereas when she's in Brazil and she's recording videos and she wants to appeal to the streets, she'll she'll adapt a blacker look. She'll go and tan for a little while. She'll put braids in her hair. All of a sudden, she looks blacker. And people were accusing her of like being an Afro, what they call an Afro convenient, being black when it was convenient for her. In this particular article, she's arguing that no one in Brazil is white. That's not really true. I'll say that white people in Brazil, look, you can just tell the difference between, say, white people in Brazil and white people in the States, white people in Germany or British, whatever. There are white people in Brazil. It's just there's a large proportion of them who would only be considered white in Brazil, while there is a segment of the population that is clearly white. So I disagree with that statement. Um, but people were saying that Anita, it made it seem as if she could just like turn on and off her blackness as if she was taking off a hat. You know, um, she made this statement saying that when she goes into the sun, she becomes very neguinha. I talked about this in a previous video, this word neguinha or neguinho, little black or whatever. And, people took that as, maybe she shouldn't approach this racial issue because blackness is not something you can put on and take off when you want to. But a whole lot of just if you're into controversy and you want to understand how people look at Anita in parts of Brazil, where some people like lead the racial politics out of this, and other people are like, this is the problem with black identity in Brazil. You have so many people of mixed race who seem to jump the fence whenever they want to in terms of their race. Let me see. So let's get into this VMA victory. Anita won the Best Latin Music Video Award at the Video Music Awards 2022, and she performed her song Envolver. That's the song she won the award for. The singer was the first Brazilian to win the award and was surprised by the victory. She took the stage and said, I really wasn't expecting this. I'm paraphrasing. I don't think I translated what she said exactly. I didn't even transcribe it. I just kind of listened to it. This is kind of what she said. She says, I think I'm going to cry. Okay, so I just want to say for whoever doesn't know, tonight it's history. It's the first time Brazil is here. It's the first in my country to. It's the first time in my country to receive an award like this, and I want to thank my family and my fans. She said after receiving the award. It looked like before and after the VMA ceremony, she was seen in this red dress, and she said this was her. She defined this look as the heart of Brazil. There's more to that. In red at the VMAs, Anita said, "Let's fight for the improvement of Brazil." So it's like she's calling for social change, like a lot of people are. And this is an election year, so she was seeing her appearance. She was speaking to a reporter where she put the L up, and a lot of people took that as her support of Lula da Silva, who's running to become president again in the upcoming election. Um, she highlighted that on the VMA stage, she performed a rhythm that was considered a crime for many years and recalled her origins. She says, "I was born and raised in the ghetto in Brazil, and for those who were born there, we would never have imagined that this would be possible. So thank you very much." So, what does Anita mean by a rhythm that was considered a crime? What the artist refers to is the fact that funk music in Brazil has always been criminalized in the minds of a large segment of Brazilian society. For the more conservative elements, funk culture represents criminality, drug trafficking, loose sexual morals, and a degeneration of society. The desire to shut down funk became so strong that in 2017, there was actually a bill introduced in the Brazilian Senate to ban funk music and its culture and the popular dances where this genre was wildly popular among Brazilian youth. The bill was actually struck down in the Senate, but the criminalization of the genre continues to this day. Is a strong connection to cops wanting to clamp down and police Brazilian favelas, majority black and brown favelas. And you just hear stories coming out of these favelas every day about how police just, come in shooting. They're looking for a particular drug dealer and they kill people just who just happen to catch the stray bullet. It just is like, literally shoot first and ask questions later, right? So the oppression of the black favelas, black and brown favelas, goes side by side, hand in hand with the oppression of funk culture. That's something that I've had to develop my own opinion on. It's like I can see things on, both sides. So just so you know, when I speak of the genre known as Brazilian funk, which arose out of funky carioca or funk that emerged in Rio de Janeiro, I must make it clear that Brazilian funk, or funky as they call it, is not the same as what we call funk in the US. In the 1970s, when Black American soul and funk was at its peak, Brazilian DJs began organizing these huge dances called bailes, where they played much of the sounds coming out of the American Black music scene that was coming out of the United States. A little of this was depicted in the 2002 Brazilian film Cidade de Deus, or City of God, where the images of the dances were recreated. Watching that scene in the film when I first saw it brought back memories of that era for me. Even as the 70s birthed a number of Brazilian artists who were either doing their own takes on American funk and soul or mixing it with elements of Brazilian samba. By the 1990s, Brazilian funk seemed to be much more inspired by the Miami bass sound that blew up sometime in the 1990s in the US. Brazilian funk lyrics often contains sexually explicit lyrics in the vein of groups like the Two Live Crew, or discuss the realities of favela life, favelas referring to the slums mounted on the outskirts and on the hills of the major cities. So this is a promo picture for Anita's song and video for Evolver. Again, when you see a lot of her videos, you see the presence of a lot of Black men and women. It's almost like there was another artist I remember, it had to been about 4 or 5 years ago, and this was a clearly white woman, but her whole video just had Black people in the background dancing and whatever. And it was just like people took it as she's exploiting the Black body. The white girl is out front where she's got all Black dancers in the back of her. People were just kind of a little bit upset with that image. It's like, okay, again, you got people willing to exploit the image of Black people, but that video spoke volumes because all of those Black people in that video remained in the background. Anita is the star of her videos, but just notice when you look at her videos, just how many Black people you see in her videos, right? What's the message there? At the 2022 Video Music Awards, Anita competed for the award with Bad Bunny, Becky G, Carol G, Daddy Yankee. Wow, what's this guy's name? Furuko, J Balvin, and Skrillex. I told you I don't really follow pop culture the way that I used to. So I've heard of Daddy Yankee, but that's pretty much the only person I know out of that group. Of artists. Anyway, wearing a red leotard. The singer took Brazilian funk to the VMAs and also made the audience dance to her hit Evolve and finalized her performance with a medley of her funk hits. On stage, she asked the question, VMA, do you think I wasn't going to shake my ass tonight? Which, well, they translated that into Portuguese as Anitta speaks very good English. I've noticed the development of her English. It's like she barely has an accent these days, but they translated it as VMA. Você achou que eu não ia balançar minha bunda hoje à noite? Because she spoke it in English and people wanted to know what she was saying, during her performance. The singer then proceeded to shake what her mama gave her to songs such as Vai Malandra, Movimento da Safoninha, and Bola Rebola. As I've pointed out, in other articles, Anitta clearly has her eyes on capturing the international music scene, as are other popular black, well, we'll say other Brazilian black Brazilian singers like Ludmilla and Isa. And what I find in Ludmilla and Isa have both gained prominence. They're both also trying to reach that international market. But the difference between Anitta, Ludmilla, and Isa and Anitta is that Ludmilla and Isa are two clearly black women, whereas Anitta is one of those people who kind of, she skates on the fence and she's whatever people see her as, whether they might see her as white, black, Latin, or mixed. She can be all of those things for people. And as she skirts the issue, it doesn't become a controversy at all. Even being in the United States for the event, the artist showed that she was following the first debate of presidential candidates. As I said, this is a presidential election year in Brazil. It's the election season, and as right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro is seeking re-election, as is the former president Lula da Silva, who was president between 2002 and 2010. Of course, it made world news when he was jailed for people called it corruption, saying his part in the huge Operation Car Wash scandal. And Lula is back. He's looking to become president again. I think Lula is like 77 or 78 now, but he's running for president again. A lot of people saw the middle classes in Brazil expand through 8 years of Lula and the first term and half of the second term of his successor, Dilma Rousseff, who took over. She was elected. She came directly out of Lula's cabinet. Wow, a lot of history going on there. Anyway, when interviewed, Anitta explained that it wasn't a coincidence that she chose to wear a red dress, which is the color of Lula's Workers' Party, the PT as it's known in Brazil, Partido dos Trabalhadores. The artist even published a photo on her Instagram profile with the number 13, which represents Lula's candidacy number. And she also made the symbol of the letter L as she was being interviewed, L standing for Lula. Although I am not a great fan of funk or Anitta, I must admit that I admire her ascension onto the world music scene. Anitta speaks both Spanish and English, as well as her native Portuguese. She has made appearances on international talk shows and is quickly growing her brand. She also has no problem with seeing salacious rumors about her sexuality and sex life, as there are constantly rumors in the headlines claiming that the singer slept with this woman, this man, or men, or whatever. Another issue that has been hotly debated, particularly amongst Black Brazilians, is the way that Anitta has always skirted the race issue or even defined herself racially, or rather not defining herself racially. While some Black Brazilians see Anitta as a light-skinned Black woman, others refer to her as a parda, mestiça, meaning brown or mixed, while still others classify her as branca, meaning white. The intriguing thing is that as Anitta has not clearly defined herself as Black, although claiming her father is a Black man, Anitta has been the target of accusations of cultural appropriation, as I said previously, as critics accuse her of borrowing the funk and favela culture that is strongly connected to the Afro-Brazilian population. When asked about her racial identity, Anitta has never publicly defined herself as Black, although she once claimed in posting a picture of herself wearing braids that when she spends time in the sun, she becomes a neguinha, apparently seeing Blackness as something she could put on and take off as if it were a hat. Now, this is what I'm saying. It depends on how you see Anitta, because in this particular piece, crossover appeal, how racially stigmatized music is accepted when the face is white, the case of singer Anitta. So the person, as I said, all of my articles are divided into my own opinion and also a translation of an article, from Portuguese. So a lot of people there are some people who look at Anita as just being white, and they're saying that, funk music is not going to be accepted until somebody comes along who has that look that can take it to the mainstream. And this is what they're saying about Anita, saying I mean, realistically, if you look at enough photos of her, you would say that Anita is not quite white, but she's definitely one of those racially indefinable people who gets to a certain pass in society by not only avoiding being labeled as black, but because of her physical appearance. So this is something that a lot of black activists have called out. It's like, why does it take a woman who looks like Anita to be able to make this music acceptable? What else can we talk about here? Okay, this is about the rivalry, as I said before, between Ludmilla and Anita. I think this is from 2019. And it just when I was reading some of the comments between Ludmilla supporters and Anita, there was also another situation. You can read this article on the blog as well, where there was another situation where Snoop Dogg was involved in the whole thing. There was a song that Ludmilla, the girl on the left, she wrote a song. And from what I remember, I have to go back and read the article again. She wrote the song and her record label initially rejected the song. So, but Anita heard the song. She says, "Oh, this is hot. We have to record this." I think they might have released it themselves. And Anita was like, "This song is great. We need to get somebody who can help us blow this song up internationally." And as Anita had built quite an audience, overseas, obviously she knows some celebrities in the United States. So Snoop Dogg is one of the people that she suggested. She reached out to Snoop. So let me get back to that. This is like I said, Anita. Her fans were just bombing Ludmilla online. They were booing her at the award show, and she broke down when she appeared on stage. This is the guy I spoke about before, Paulo Gustavo. This is the guy the comedian, the comic actor who passed away a few years ago from during the whole COVID pandemic. But where I'm going is that it was Ludmilla's song, but somehow Anita managed to get her name in the songwriting credits, which led to they had already had beef. And then this was just another piece that escalated the feud that they had. Like, you didn't write this song. This is my song. Um, so when the song reached a certain number of downloads, I remember they released this like online flyer saying, thank you, we've reached, I don't know, it was like 10 million streams or something like that. 10 million views on YouTube, 100 million. Can't remember the number. It was just it was a massive hit online. And when the thank yous came out, thank you for helping us reaching this plateau, it had a picture of Anita, Snoop, and the producer of the song, but Ludmilla was nowhere to be found. And it was like, well, damn. I just wondered what Snoop was thinking. Did he know that he was in the middle of all of that? Anyway, like I said, it's too much to really get into with one article. But feel free to go to the blog and check out some of these pieces. So just a little bit about Anita's background. She was actually born Larissa de Macedo Machado. Somebody said, that name is never going to make it. So I think Anita's the one who actually adapted this stage name. She was born in Honorio Gorgel, a neighborhood in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro on March 30th, 1993. So Anita's not even 30 yet. She'll be 30 next year. Her relationship with music began as a child. Ever since she was little, she knew she wanted to be a singer. At the age of 8, encouraged by her grandparents, she began singing in the choir of the Santa Luzia church located in her neighborhood. One day, just for fun, Anita posted a video on YouTube singing funk and using a bottle of perfume as a microphone. In 2010, the video caught the attention of the Furacão 2000 music producer, who invited her to some auditions. After being approved, she signed a contract with the label. This is really something. There have been a number of stars who earned music contracts. Anita was discovered off of YouTube. Ludmilla was discovered off of YouTube, as was Isa. I'm quite sure there's probably several more by now, but those are the first three that come to mind. And all of these women had massive hits that you just heard all over Brazil. Well, I was living in Sao Paulo, so I was hearing it in Sao Paulo in the streets every single day. So, YouTube has become a star maker. Released in 2013, her debut album, Anita, reached the top of the Brazilian music charts and was responsible for establishing her as an artist. That year, the hit Show das Poderosas won in the categories of what they call Música Chiclete and the best video clip at the Multi-Show Award for Brazilian Music. For years, working to expand her career around the world, in June 2020, Anitta announced the signing of a contract with Warner Records in the United States. Tocami, with the participation of what is it, Archangel and De La Ghetto and Me Gusta, in partnership with Cardi B and rapper Mike Towers, were two of the releases of this new phase of the artist. Versions of Me, released in April 2022, was the singer's first album with an international label. In addition to the song Girl from Rio, the work also features the song Envolver, Boys Don't Cry, and Faking Love. With her chart-topping career in the era of streams and downloads, the Brazilian has amassed a fortune that is larger than an impressive list of well-known American entertainers. Already on the listing of Brazil's most powerful women, Anitta has a fortune valued at more than 100 million US dollars, which at the time of the estimate was equal to 553 million Brazilian reais, according to Forbes magazine. That's with the American dollar being worth more than 5 Brazilian reais for a few years now. In her native Brazil, Anitta is more than halfway to billionaire status. Again, that's only in reais, 1/5 of the American dollar at this point. But still, that's incredibly impressive. On March 24th of this year, Anitta added another important accomplishment in her already impressive resume when she became the first solo Latin artist, let's say Latina artist, to reach #1 on Spotify. In about 120 days after the release of Envolver, the song had already reached 6.39 million streams worldwide. Regularly ranking atop Spotify's global top, the most used music player and podcast in the world, is not only the ranking in which Anitta comes in ahead of other musicians. Making a comparison with some singers, the Brazilian singer has a larger net worth than several artists with international careers. Anitta is the most played Brazilian singer on streaming platforms and has more than 60 million followers on Instagram. That's a lot of people. That's maybe a little more than what? A little more than, a third of all of Brazil. Brazil, I think, is closing somewhere between 210, 220 million citizens. And Anitta has more, it's somewhere between, looks like about a third, more than a third of the entire population of Brazil, 60 million people. I mean, that's more followers than a lot of countries. Currently, the singer is investing in her international career and is also part of numerous advertising campaigns. The resounding success of the hit Envolver was another step for Anitta in strengthening her brand as an international singer. To get an idea of just how big Anitta's fortune is, compare her fortune to some well-known other artists coming out of the United States. Rapper Eminem has had a career spanning more than 20 years and has had several big hits around the world, but his fortune is estimated to be equal to that of Anitta. Eminem's fortune is estimated to be at about $100 million. Singer and guitarist for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, has a fortune of about 90 million. With an award-winning international career, Nicki Minaj is considered she's considered to be the most influential rapper of all time by the New York Times, but even with all of her success, her fortune is estimated to be about $25 million less than that of Anitta. The Trinidad-born rapper has a net worth of $75 million. I find that intriguing. New York Times would call her the most influential rapper of all time. Okay, moving on. With worldwide success in the 2000s, the American singer Nelly was one of the rap artists who sold the most records in history. However, this didn't reflect in a fortune greater than Anitta's, as Nelly owns a fortune of about $60 million. All of these comparisons are just to show, like, wow, Anitta, her fame and fortune has exploded in her little less than a decade in the spotlight, where she's earned more money than some top name musical artists coming out of the States. Again, that's very impressive. There's a whole lot more that I could say about Anitta, specifically in terms of the race issue, but you have to stay tuned to another episode for that breakdown. So that's all I have for now. I'm curious to know what you thought about this piece. If any of you tuned in to the Video Music Awards, what do you think about Anitta? What do you think of her in terms of race? Do you see her as a light-skinned Black woman? You see her as Latina? You see her as white? You see her as just Black? How do you see Anitta? Feel free to leave a comment there. So I chose to just focus mostly on her career at this point and her big win at the VMAs, but there's so much more to Anitta. She's just very symbolic of the era that we're living in. take it, take that far, however you want, however you interpret that. Just, today's pop stars, they make a lot of money. They're everywhere in this era of social media. And again, I'm saying mad props to Anita for what she has achieved, but it just speaks of where we are as a society also. So anyway, feel free to drop a comment here. Just give me your thoughts on Anita, her victory, her appearance. Um, in future videos, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that people talk about concerning Anita, because the blog and this video is talking about Brazil and analyzing Brazil from the perspective of race, and there's a lot to dissect with Anita. So if you like this video and others, feel free, definitely subscribe to the channel, share this video, spark a conversation, and hit the notification bell so that you'll get notifications whenever I post up new videos. So with that said, I'm going to end this here and hope to see you guys in the next video.